So what happens when you clog up one of the world's most critical commercial arteries? Well, as we've all seen over the past couple of years, total chaos. A conflict in one region sent these massive shockwaves across the entire global system. So today, we're going to trace those shockwaves, ripple by ripple.
All right, first things first, we really have to get our heads around just how crucial this waterway actually is. I mean, the Red Sea, it's not just some body of water on a map. Think of it more like the central nervous system for all trade between East and West.
Get this, a whopping 12% of all global trade sails right through here. It's the key link, connecting Europe with Asia through the Suez Canal. So what happens when that shortcut slams shut? Well, the global economy is forced to take a very, very expensive detour.
And this really shows you the stark reality of that detour. I mean, look at this. Taking the long way around Africa, you're adding over 3,000 nautical miles and almost 2 weeks to the trip. Now, for a global supply chain that's built on a just-in-time model, that is an absolute eternity.
Okay, so keep that image of a clogged artery in your mind. Let's talk about the very first ripple effect. When the Houthi attacks kicked off in late 2023, the first and most immediate consequence was, you guessed it, a massive shockwave right through the global supply chain.
And wow, this chart just lays it all out. The impact was immediate and it was drastic. Container traffic through the canal just plummeted. We're talking a 75% drop. Ships just stopped using the route, plain and simple. It created this huge logistical scramble, really unlike anything we've seen in decades.
And the consequences? They were felt right away. A 47% jump in transit time? That means huge delays for everything, from the phone in your pocket to the parts for your car. The cost of shipping went through the roof, and companies everywhere were just scrambling to deal with all this disruption.
But here's where the story gets a really fascinating twist. You'd think those shipping rates, the spot indexes, which are basically the real-time price, would just stay sky high, right? Well, they did soar at first, but then the market kind of corrected itself. See, a whole bunch of new container ships, which had been ordered years ago, happened to hit the water at just the right moment. This created a surplus of ships, a glut of capacity, and then actually pushed prices right back down, even while ships were still taking that long, slow route around Africa. Kinda wild, huh?
But this was never just about economics. The ripples didn't just stop at the ports. No, they washed right over into the world of geopolitics, turning what was an economic disruption into a full-blown military and geopolitical crisis.
And you can see just how quickly things escalated right here on this timeline. It all started with the Houthi attacks, which they linked to the war in Gaza. The first response was defensive, a naval coalition called Operation Prosperity Guardian. But pretty soon it was clear that wasn't enough, so the U.S. shifted to an offensive strategy, which, believe it or not, is what eventually paved the way for a very fragile, very high-stakes diplomatic truce.
Operation Rough Rider. That was the real turning point. The whole strategy changed. It went from just defending ships to actively trying to dismantle, to disintegrate the Houthis' ability to launch attacks in the first place. This was a huge escalation.
And the price tag for this new strategy? It was just staggering. We're talking over $1 billion in just the first month. So yeah, this wasn't some simple policing action. This was a full-on, sustained air campaign, and it completely changed the dynamics of the entire conflict. All of that intense military pressure created a totally new reality on the ground, and that is what finally opened the door for diplomacy. The peace summit in Egypt, it explicitly tied a ceasefire in Gaza to a truce in the Red Sea. It just goes to show you how deeply interconnected these conflicts really were. But of course, the story doesn't end there. Just when it looked like the situation in Yemen was starting to calm down, the crisis, well, it mutated. A brand new flashpoint ignited, but this time it was on the African side of the Red Sea.
So the big question on everyone's mind was, okay, after 2 years of all this chaos, what could possibly happen next? Well, the answer turned out to be a geopolitical curveball nobody saw coming.
And here it is. Out of nowhere, Israel makes this incredibly bold, strategic move. It becomes the very first nation to recognize the independence of Somaliland. And just like that, Israel had a critical new strategic outpost right at the mouth of the Red Sea, looking directly across the water at Yemen.
Well, you can bet the Houthi response was swift, and it was crystal clear. Their leader came out and declared that any Israeli presence in Somaliland would be considered a target. I mean, they were openly threatening to drag the Horn of Africa straight into the middle of this whole mess.
And all of this, it brings us to what might be the deepest, most significant ripple of all.
We're talking about the fracturing of old alliances and the birth of a brand new strategic competition playing out across the region. Now, to really get this, you have to look at the map of Yemen. It is so complex. The country is basically a patchwork of competing groups, and a lot of them are backed by powerful outside countries. This whole landscape became the proxy battleground for a growing rivalry between two major Gulf allies.
And just look at the contrast laid out here. On one hand, you have Saudi Arabia. Their main worry is keeping Yemen in one piece to secure their own border. But then you have the UAE, and they're playing a totally different game. They're all about projecting power, securing strategic ports. And check this out. Their key allies inside Yemen are complete opposites. The Saudis back the official government, while the UAE is backing the separatists who want to break the country apart.
So this isn't just a simple disagreement between friends. It's way bigger than that. It's a full-blown geopolitical schism. You could almost call it a new Cold War for influence that is actively reshaping the security of the entire region.
So let's pull back. After 2 years of these shocks and aftershocks, what's the takeaway? What is the new normal when it comes to global trade and security?
If anything, this crisis taught us some really crucial lessons. First, our supply chains are incredibly fragile, way more than we thought, and they're built on just a handful of vulnerable choke points. Second, it doesn't take a superpower anymore. Small groups with pretty low-cost tech can now cause massive global disruption. Third, those old reliable alliances, they're starting to crack. And finally, the game has changed. There's been a permanent shift in how companies and even entire countries have to think about and calculate risk.
And that really is the bottom line, isn't it? The Red Sea has been fundamentally changed. It's not just a simple trade route anymore, not just a line on a map for ships. It is now a permanent, contested stage where major geopolitical rivalries are going to play out.
You know, the events of these past 2 years have been a huge wake-up call, showing us just how interconnected and fragile our global system really is. The Red Sea crisis? It was a stress test, and frankly, one we nearly failed. And it has to leave us with one big lingering question. Where is the next ripple going to begin?